millions of dollars, and we are getting nothing.
The wealth is in the ground, in the phosphate mines which dominate the landscape. The government-run company makes millions of dollars a day selling this mineral abroad. Yet this is one of the poorest regions in Tunisia. In 2008, 3 years before the Jasmine Revolution, people here revolted. But their uprising was brutally suppressed. All of these men, more than 50 of them, were beaten and imprisoned.
The protests back then were censored. There was no media, no Facebook here. People were too scared to tell our story because the regime was too strong.
In the same village, we meet graduates in their late 20s who've never worked a day in their lives. They have a choice: either stay here, unable to get married or earn money, or try to migrate to Europe. This is a region on the economic and social edge of Tunisia. People here feel disconnected with events in Tunis and the country's transition to democracy. Ben Ali and his political police may be gone, but there's still a deep sense of injustice here. Ben Ali's departure is just the beginning for this new nation. The transitional government must take notice of what's happening in Gafsa. The root causes of this revolution are not resolved. Nazanin Bashiri, Al Jazeera, Gafsa, in southern Tunisia.
Iraq's government has imposed a curfew in Baghdad before planned demonstrations later on Friday. Prime Minister Nour al-Maliki is urging people not to take part, warning they could be attacked by Al-Qaeda. Thousands of people unhappy with the performance of their new government are expected to rally. Well, after 4 days of searching, hopes of finding more survivors of that earthquake in New Zealand are fading. Rescue crews are scouring the rubble, but the threat of aftershocks is hampering the operation. Tanya Page has the latest from Christchurch.
Rescuers are working around the clock. The Canterbury television building now a mangled pile of metal and concrete. There's little hope anyone will be found alive here, but they're still trying. More than half of the dead have been pulled from the rubble of Canterbury television, and an English language school also in the building. Police say up to 120 more bodies may be found. New amateur video filmed by a Japanese tourist shows the exact time the earthquake struck. A moment that has changed Christchurch forever. The death toll is steadily rising and the danger is far from over. The aftershocks come regularly, every one bringing this cliff face closer to further collapse. All the people who live near it were evacuated overnight. Boulders the size of cars have come crashing down. It's been raining here and more bad weather is forecast. The fear is that could loosen the soil, still holding up the remaining cliff.
Yeah, so Marty Murphy's been here 50 years. This is it, I'm afraid, isn't it, Marty?
Rob Dowson is moving his 84-year-old father-in-law out.
I think it's ripping him apart just by shifting out, but also, as I mentioned, this is going to be the story that's going to be repeated all over in this area.
Sewage, electricity and water supplies are gradually being restored, but right through the city's eastern suburbs, roads and bridges are damaged. It will be many months before Christchurch is back on its feet. Tanya Page, Al Jazeera, Christchurch, New Zealand.
In northwest Pakistan, another convoy of NATO fuel tankers has been attacked. At least 4 people were killed in Peshawar. Up to 25 trucks bound for Afghanistan were set ablaze at a NATO terminal on the Pakistani side of the border. Convoys have come under repeated attack. Nearly all fuel and supplies for US forces in Afghanistan travels along the land route in Pakistan. Well, Julian Assange has condemned the extradition system as unfair. The WikiLeaks founder says he'll appeal after a British judge ruled he can be extradited to Sweden, where he's accused of rape and sexual assault. His lawyers argue he won't get a fair trial. He also risks being transported to the US, where he's infuriated many for leaking secret diplomatic cables. Tim Friend was at the court in London.
Well, this is a severe blow to Julian Assange and his legal team. He will appeal, of course, but he's out on bail, and he questioned the whole motivation of this case. He said, "Why am I the subject to a $360,000 bail proceeding?" I think he suspects the hand of the United States behind this. They feel hugely embarrassed by his revelations via WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange and his legal team fear that he may eventually be taken back to the United States, where of course there's a body of opinion that thinks he should be tried for espionage and WikiLeaks deemed to be a terrorist organization. He also said he had concerns about the European extradition process. He said it was a tick-boxing exercise, a rubber stamping exercise, and he's also very concerned about the way in which rape trials in Sweden are conducted. A proportion of the case is always heard in private, and his concern is that at that point he might not get a fair trial. The judge here in the UK, in London, disagreed with that. He said he thought he'd get a fair trial there, and therefore he should be returned or at least sent to Sweden to undergo that process.
The US Justice Department has arrested a 20-year-old Saudi national in Texas for his alleged involvement in a bomb plot that may have targeted former President George W. Bush and nuclear plants. Khalid Ali Ad-Dawsari was arrested on Wednesday. He arrived in the United States in 2008 on a student visa. The US Justice Department says there's no evidence the suspect was part of a group, and he apparently had been acting alone. The United Nations says it will extend its mandate for peacekeepers in East Timor for another year. The Security Council says its personnel will stay on to help the local police force strengthen credibility. Since gaining independence from Indonesia more than a decade ago, the tiny nation of East Timor has struggled to look after its own security. Anger over Ireland's shattered economy is expected to see a backlash at the ballot box. Voters are expected to vent their anger at the Fianna Fáil party. It's blamed by many for turning the economy from one of Europe's most impressive to one of the poorest. Rory Challens reports.
Look at Ireland's tourist board video and it's obvious what they want visitors to see here. A land of green lanes, friendly pubs and Celtic charm. But banking crises and humiliating European bailouts have hurt Ireland's image overseas. Hoteliers like Joe O'Flynn say they're fighting a losing battle worsened by bad government policy.
The room rates have been driven down to unsustainable levels, artificially supported by the banks, who won't lend to small businesses, but yet are expecting us to compete with them on a level playing field.
Ireland's tourism industry claims it can help power the country out of its economic woes if the incoming government makes some changes. There are big claims being made for what tourism can do for Ireland's current situation. Create 21,600 new jobs, generate $8.5 billion in revenues and $2.3 billion in taxes towards the battered public purse. The industry's flag wavers are making sure politicians on the campaign trail are listening.
All of the political parties